Chapter 14 of The Tower Treasure. Rocco's not around, Joe replied to Smuff. There's water in the sink in the back. Shall I call the fire department? No, I can manage this, Smuff declared. But where's a pail? Frank dashed into the back room and found a pail under the sink. He filled it with water and handed the pail to Smuff, who hurried to the yard. He doused the incinerator flames, which hissed and crackled, then died. Some people have no sense, Smuff commented. The idea of anyone starting a fire, then going off and leaving it. I'll bet that was Rocco's work. As for you boys, you had to call me. Didn't have the savvy to put out a simple fire. Good thing you were around, Frank observed, suppressing a smile. I'll say it was, Smuff agreed, and Chief Callie is sure going to hear about this. Oh, please, don't tell him about us, Joe spoke up, half closing his eyes so Smuff could not see the twinkle in them. I didn't mean that. Oscar Smuff is no squealer. I mean, colleague is going to hear what I did. The detective chuckled. One more notch in my gun, as the cowboys say. Suddenly Smuff sobered and looked at his wristwatch. Oh no, he cried out. 10 minutes to 6. I can't make my plane. That's a shame, Frank said consolingly. But cheer up, Smuff. There's a 7 o'clock plane for Albany. I wish you luck in your interview. Smuff stormed out of the fruit store and disappeared with his car. The Hardys and their friends burst into roars of laughter, which did not stop until a woman customer came into the shop. All the boys but Frank and Joe left. Rocco returned at 6:30, pleased that so much fruit had been sold during his absence. You're better salesman than Rocco, he grinned widely. The Hardys went home, well satisfied with their day's work. The 6 o'clock plane had left without Smuff. Their father could make his trip to the hospital without the annoying detective's interference. Fenton Hardy did not return home until the next afternoon. When the boys came from school, they found him in high spirits. Solve the mystery? Joe asked eagerly. Practically. First of all, Jackley is dead. Did he confess? You're not very sympathetic toward the poor fellow, Joe. Yes, he confessed. Fortunately, Oscar Smuff didn't show up while Jackley was talking. Frank and Joe glanced at each other, and their father smiled quietly. I have an idea, he said, that you two sleuths know more about this Smuff business than you would care to tell. Well, anyhow, the Albany police and I had a clear field. I saw Jackley before he died and questioned him about the tower robbery. Did he admit everything? Jackley said he came to Bayport with the intention of robbery. He stole a car, smashed it up, and took Chet's. Then he went to rob the ticket office. When he failed in that, he decided to hang around town for a few days. He hit upon Tower Mansion as his next effort. Jackley entered the library with gloves on, opened the safe, and took out the jewelry and securities. What did he do with the loot? That's what I'm coming to. It was not until Jackley knew he was at the point of death that he did confess to the tower affair. Then he said, yes, I took the stuff, but I didn't dare try selling any of it right away, so I hid it. You can get all the stuff back easily. It's in the old tower. That was all he said. Jackley lost consciousness then and never regained it. When did Smuff get there? Joe asked eagerly. Not until after Jackley had gone into a coma, Mr. Hardy replied. We both sat by his bed, hoping the man would awaken, but he died within an hour. Just where Jackley hid the loot in the old tower, he was never able to say. Does Smuff know what Jackley said? No. If the loot's hidden in the old Applegate Tower, we'll find it in no time, Frank exclaimed. Tower Mansion has 2 towers, the old and the new, Joe reminded him. We'll search the old tower first. The story seems likely enough, Mr. Hardy remarked. Jackley would gain nothing by lying about it on his deathbed. He probably became panicky after he committed the robbery and hid in the old tower until he was able to get away safely. No doubt he decided to hide the stuff there and take a chance on coming back for it sometime after the affair had blown over. Joe nodded. That was why Jackley couldn't be traced through the jewels and the bonds. They were never disposed of. They've been lying in the old tower all this time. I tried to get him to tell me in just what part of the tower the loot was hidden, Mr. Hardy continued, but he died before he could say any more. Too bad, said Frank, but it shouldn't be hard to find the loot now that we have a general idea where it is. Probably Jackley didn't hide it very carefully. Since the old tower has been unoccupied for a long time, the stuff would be safe there from snoopers. Joe jumped up from his chair. I think we ought to get busy and go search the old tower right away. Oh boy, maybe we can hand old Mr. Applegate his jewels and bonds this afternoon and clear Mr. Robinson. Let's go. I'll leave it to you boys to make the search, said Mr. Hardy with a smile. Then you can have the satisfaction of turning over the stolen property to Mr. Applegate. I guess you can get along without me in this case from now on. We wouldn't have got very far if it hadn't been for you, Frank declared. And I wouldn't have got very far if it hadn't been for you, so we're even. Mr. Hardy's smile broadened. Well, good luck to you. As the boys started from the study, Frank said, Thanks, Dad. I only hope the Applegates don't throw us out when we ask to be allowed to look around inside the old tower. Just tell them, his father advised, that you have a pretty good clue to where the bonds and jewels are hidden, and they'll let you search. Joe grinned. Frank, we'll have that $1,000 reward before the day is over. The brothers raced from the house, confident that they were about to solve that tower treasure mystery. That's the end of the chapter. Now, for our Bible story, we have a wife for Isaac. When Sarah, Isaac's mother, was 127 years old, she died. Abraham bought a field that had a cave and buried Sarah in the cave. This burial place was called Machpelah. After Sarah's death, Abraham and Isaac felt lonely. Isaac was now a man. Abraham decided Isaac needed a wife. In those countries, the parents usually chose husbands and wives for their children. Abraham wanted to choose a good wife for Isaac. He thought about his brother Nahor, who lived in Haran. Nahor was the father of 12 sons. By this time, these sons were married and had grown-up children. Abraham called his trusted servant Eliezer and said, Go back to my old home where my relatives are and get a wife for Isaac. Eliezer knew the journey would be long and hard. Then what if Abraham's people were not willing to send a daughter into a strange country to become the wife of a man they had never seen? Abraham said, If the woman is not willing to come back with you, I will not blame you. Faithful Eliezer said, I will go. Eliezer took with him 10 camels, several servants, and many rich presents. For days and days they traveled across valleys, hills, and rivers, and by the great lonely desert. At last they came to the northern part of Mesopotamia and stopped near a well outside the city of Haran. It was evening, and the women of the city were coming to fill their pitchers at the well. Eliezer had learned to trust in Abraham's God. Now he prayed that God would show him a good wife for Isaac. Let it be, O Lord, that the young woman I shall ask to give me a drink will also water my camels. Then I shall know that she is the one you have chosen to be Isaac's wife. While Eliezer prayed, a beautiful young woman came to get water. When she had filled the pitcher, Eliezer asked for a drink. Although he was a stranger, she spoke kindly to him and offered to draw water for his camels also. Again and again she filled the pitcher and poured the water into the trough for the thirsty camels. When she finished, Eliezer gave her 2 gold bracelets and an earring. He asked, Whose daughter are you? Would your father have room to lodge us? The girl said, I am Rebekah, the granddaughter of Nahor. There is plenty of room in my father's house for you. Then she hurried to tell her family about the man at the well and to show the beautiful presents he had given her. Eliezer knew his prayer had been answered. He bowed his head and worshiped God. When Rebekah's brother Laban heard her story and saw the rich ornaments Eliezer had given her, he ran to meet the strangers at the well. We have room for you and your camels, he said. They went with Laban. He brought water to wash their feet and food for them to eat, but Eliezer would not eat. First, let me tell you why I have come, he said. I am Abraham's servant. God has blessed my master greatly, giving him flocks and herds, silver and gold, and many servants. God also gave him and Sarah a son in their old age. Now Abraham has given all his great riches to his son Isaac. Because Isaac is not married, Abraham sent me to find a wife for Isaac. Eliezer told how Rebekah, in answer to his prayer, had offered water to him and his thirsty camels. Rebekah's father and brother Laban were willing to let her go with Eliezer because they believed that God had sent him. Rebekah too was willing. How thankful Eliezer was. He bowed his head once more to worship the great God who had helped him. Afterward, he enjoyed the feast that had been prepared. That same night, he gave other presents of silver and gold and beautiful clothing to Rebekah and her family. The next morning, Eliezer said, "Now let me return to my master." Laban and his mother did not want Rebekah to leave them so soon. "Can you not stay for a few more days?" they asked. But Eliezer insisted that he must go at once. They called Rebekah, and she said, "I will go." So they said goodbye and sent her away with her nurse and other maids. On the homeward journey, Rebekah and her maids rode the camels, and Eliezer led the way. Perhaps they traveled the same road that Abraham had traveled many years before when he went to the land that God had promised. At last they were near the place where Abraham and Isaac lived. It was evening, and Isaac was out in the fields alone, thinking about God. When he saw the camels coming, he hurried to meet them. Rebekah asked, "Who is the man coming to meet us?" "That is my master Isaac," Eliezer replied. At that, Rebekah got down from her camel and covered her face with a veil. When Isaac met them, Eliezer told how God had answered prayer and sent Rebekah to him. Isaac took her to the tent that had been his mother's, and she became his wife. He loved her, and she comforted him in the loss of his mother. Time passed, and finally Abraham died too. He was 175 years old. Ishmael heard of his death and came to help Isaac bury his father. They placed Abraham's body in the cave where Sarah was buried.